Hey skiers, I'm Jeff from skiessentials.com. I'm here today to talk about cross-country skis, specifically how to shop for cross-country skis and how to choose what's right for you. Just like downhill skis or alpine skis, if you're new to the sport, it can be a little bit overwhelming, and technology has changed a lot. So if your cross-country skis are 25 years old and you've been using a bunch of kick wax your whole life, you might be surprised that you don't really need to do that anymore, which is very exciting in my opinion as somebody who has used kick wax a lot in my life. And we'll kind of do this similar to how we did our guide to how to buy alpine skis. I broke this into 4 price tiers, and within those price tiers, I think we can have some really good conversations about the differences that you're seeing, why it makes sense to move up to a different price tier, and then like some huge variety up here in terms of different application. And that brings me to a few pieces of advice. Before you start shopping, you should be familiar with a few different things. The first one, which is very important and might sound obvious, but you should know what kind of skiing you want to do. And really by that, I mean, what terrain are you going to be using your cross-country skis on? Are you going to be going to a kind of formal cross-country center that has groomed trails with groomed classic tracks? Maybe you live in a town that has a budding high school race program and they've got their own trail network with groomed tracks. Are you going to be using it on groomed tracks or not? That's a huge one. Maybe you don't want to use them on groomed tracks at all, and you already know that. You want to go explore golf courses and explore just terrain in your backyard, and maybe even get some elevation gain and go up and come back down. Or do you want to skate ski? You know, those are kind of the big 3, whether you're going to be doing some kind of classic skiing in or out of a track, whether you're going to be going more into a backcountry situation, or whether you want to skate ski. So those things are really, really important to know before you just start kind of looking through everything, because if you didn't have that knowledge, you could be steered in kind of the wrong direction and not be happy with the gear that you ended up with. So really important. It's really good to understand ski width and kind of what that indicates, and that really ties into what we were just talking about. So if you are going to be using a ski in a groomed classic track or at a cross-country ski center or a touring center, a groomed classic track, you know, the 2 little like grooves that you ski along in, that's about 68 millimeters wide, the track itself. So there's a limit to how wide your skis can be. Generally, I would kind of put that limit around 65. Yes, a ski that's 68 could fit into a track, but it's not going to feel very good. You're going to be hitting the sides of the track quite a bit and lose a lot of efficiency, and we can kind of talk about that going through. So if you want to use your skis in groomed tracks and you're looking at a ski that's 70 millimeters wide or more, then you're gonna run into some issues. So that's one thing that's really important to be aware of. And then ski length. Ski length is an interesting thing with cross-country skis. It seems like new cross-country skiers generally assume that their skis are going to be sized based on your height. And with cross-country skis, that's not true really at all. When we're talking about downhill skis, height definitely plays into it, and leverage and stuff like that. On cross-country skis, it's all determined based on your weight, and that's because the flex of a cross-country ski is so important. So, for example, to take this ski behind me, this is the Fisher OTX 62. We'll look at all this stuff when we run through the skis, but this has kind of a posi track or fish scale style grip zone. If you were too lightweight for the length that you were choosing, you would never flex this ski enough to actually get that to touch the snow. So you would never be able to get any grip for going uphill. And then alternatively, if you chose a ski that was too short for you or you are too heavy for that length, the opposite's going to happen. So you're going to be pushing through the flex, and that fish scale zone is going to come in contact with the snow too often, making the skis just very, very slow. So there's no universal rule to how long your skis should be based on your weight. Basically, each ski is going to be different, and each manufacturer is going to have their own kind of set of recommendations. So it's really important to kind of check with the manufacturer's size range for weight, and then that's how you're going to be choosing your length. Pole length is also a big thing. If you want to classic ski, your poles are going to be a different length than if you want to skate ski. So I brought a couple poles up here. This is pretty darn close to my classic length, and the indicator here that we like to use is armpit. And it can be kind of weird. It's basically like you want your poles to be just about exactly as tall as where your armpit starts. I believe this is a 145, which I've classic skied with a 145 plenty of times before, I believe. Yeah, this is a 145. Say if I was brand new to the sport, this is maybe a touch tall, and then you could go down to 140, and you're going to see some really effective size charts out there as well. So just be aware that classic and skate are different lengths. This is a great example of a skate length. So generally skate lengths are going to start at your chin and even go up as high as, say, your eyes or so. This is a 155, kind of similar. I have a Nordic ski racing background, and I'm pretty darn sure I've raced on both 155 and 160 length poles. I don't remember exactly. I've definitely used both, and they both kind of work. But for me, 155 is nice because they're a little easier to handle. You know, skate poles are really long and can start to feel a little bit cumbersome if they're on the long side. So just be aware that that's how Nordic poles or cross-country poles are sized. Last thing before we kind of get into the skis themselves and the price tiers here is boot and binding compatibility. We're living in a great time for cross-country skis right now because basically everything has been simplified to just NNN compatibility. For a long time, we had NNN, and then we also had SNS, which was a Salomon-specific norm for boot and binding compatibility. SNS is pretty much gone. Salomon uses the ProLink system now, which is just completely compatible with NNN. So it should simplify things quite a bit, but it's important to know, because if you're shopping for new skis and you're not shopping for one of these complete packages, if you have an SNS boot, it's not going to work with any of these NNN style bindings. The only thing that you really have to pay attention to now, aside from the style of boot, which we'll talk more about, is NNN versus NNN BC. So we're not even going to talk about NNN BC until we get to the last two skis over here. And essentially what happens is you get a bigger kind of connecting bar. So this is a classic NNN boot. This is an NNN BC boot. And even probably from there on the camera, you can tell that this bar is wider. You might not be able to tell from there, but it's also thicker. So think about it. This is not going to fit in a NNN binding, and this would essentially be loose in a NNN BC binding, neither of which would work particularly well. So that's it. That's kind of like my main advice, like the things that you should know when you're kind of shopping for cross-country skis. And now let's look at some of these packages and kind of talk about the prices and what's going to work best. So first three skis over here are all in what I'm going to consider price tier number one. And essentially we're in the kind of, I think it's like 390 to 450 range. Call it 400 to 450 range. As a reminder, that comes with skis, boots, bindings, and poles. So a lot of value. It's not just the ski. You can get the ski on its own for far less than that. So these first 3 packages are really good for somebody who is truly new to the sport. You probably don't know exactly what you're going to do. And I would say for a new skier, you don't want to rule out you don't want to make it so you can't go in a groomed classic track, because being able to go in a groomed classic track is a really, really, really good way to learn and improve. You basically don't have to worry about where your skis are going. You just think about your stride and kind of your technique overall. So starting with this Rossignol XT55, we sell a ton of these because it does just pack a lot of value. It's a pretty forgiving flex pattern. There is a long fish scale or posi-track style grip zone. With these fish scale style grip zones, they are the most forgiving. They're not the fastest, but you're going to get a lot of grip, and it's just going to make it easier for you to essentially go uphill, to generate forward momentum and go uphill. This 55 width is great. You know, it'll fit right in a groomed classic track, and it's going to be pretty darn efficient. And then I brought some boots too. We won't look at all the boots, but this is just a Rossignol XC1 Tour boot. This is about as basic as it gets for a cross-country boot. But if you're just going out and kind of shuffling around and figuring things out, you really don't need much more than this. And to be honest, we won't really see significant increases in performance or boot performance until we get at least into kind of the middle price tier here. These next 2 skis are really similar, the Salomon Escape Snow and the Rossignol XT60, so in the same line as that XT55. Obviously here we're moving up in width. So as you move up in width, these skis are going to be a little bit better off trail. So golf courses, local trail networks that aren't groomed, your backyard, anything like that, these are going to be a little bit better than that 55. You know, with cross-country skis, especially if you're familiar with downhill skis, the increases in width can seem like marginal and not that important, but even just bumping up like 4 millimeters in width here, this is going to be a little bit better off trail. So if you know that you're going to be spending, I don't know, say half your time or 30% of your time off trail, it might be worth moving into one of these slightly wider models. And then the XT60 compared to the 55 is just a touch more expensive. I think the price ticks up like $50 or something like that. The ski itself is wider. Essentially the performance is going to be the same, but you do get an XC2 Tour boot. So a little bit more support, very similar performance, a little bit more efficient power transfer too from the sole. So there really aren't huge differences among these first 3 examples here. All really, really good for a true beginner skier that just wants to kind of get their feet wet and explore what the sport or what the activity is all about. Moving into the second price tier here, so that's going to start with this XC60R skin and then end, I believe, with this Aerolite 60 skate ski. Yeah, that's exactly the middle tier. And then that we're kind of in the $500 to $600 range, so we are moving up in price. We're also moving up in performance. So this XC60 is a really good example of just like what happens when you go up in price. So this actually shares the same exact shape with the XT60, but it has a little bit better construction, and by better, I mean more efficient. So it's going to be a little faster in its kick and glide. And then this ski actually uses a skin grip system. So kind of to compare directly, excuse me, you can see the difference in the length of that grip system. So the fish scale track is much, much longer, and essentially what's happening here is these skis that use the posi track system or a fish scale system, they're going to have more and easier grip, but they're going to be slower. So this is a really good example of something that would be a good choice for somebody who has some existing technique. You know, you have a decent classic stride and you want a little bit more efficiency. It's 60, it can still fit in a groomed classic track. It's not going to be the most efficient, but it absolutely will work. So if you want to go out and put some miles, or be more appropriate to say put some kilometers in at your local touring center in a groomed classic track, you're going to go further and faster on a ski like this than you would on the XT60. Alternatively, it's not going to be quite as good if you take it off trail. So that's when you lose out on a little bit of that grip and a little bit of the stability there. But it's a really cool option because it is still wide enough to kind of explore off trail. It's just a give or take whether you want more speed, more efficiency, or more grip. And then as we're moving up here in price, boots start to get a little bit nicer. This is the Rossignol XC5. Again, a pretty basic classic boot here, but just more support, more stability. I really like how tall this kind of ankle gaiter is too. Keep the snow out of your boot if you happen to be going off trail into more adventurous terrain. So really cool ski. Moving on, this is the ski that we used as an example earlier. This is the Fischer OTX 62. And this to me is starting to feel more like a ski that is better going off trail. You know, we're getting wider into 62. It does come with this nice OTX boot that just like, to me, kind of screams it wants to go on an adventure, wants to go on a nice tour through the woods. And then being a little bit wider really helps in softer snow. And we're back to like a really nice, long fish scale style kick zone. So you're going to get a ton of grip, super, super easy to use. Again, like, highly recommend staying away from kick wax unless you're like ski racing or something like that. So really good. Can still fit in a groomed classic track, so you have the potential of that, but 62 is starting to get kind of wide for a groomed classic track. Absolutely can still do it, but you're going to be losing out on some efficiency. So it's more like it's a percentages thing. You know, if you're spending 50% of your time in a groomed classic track and 50% of your time out of a classic track, this XC60 R-Skin could be great. If you're spending 80% of your time off trail and 20% in a groomed classic track, that's where I think this Fischer OTX 62 would be a really good choice. And then moving along here, we're kind of in a nice progression in these three skis, or the first three skis in our second price tier. This is another one that we sell a lot of. This is the Rossignol OT 65. And this really is better off trail than in a groomed track. And you might remember when we were talking about groomed track width, yes, this will still fit. It just doesn't feel very good. And kind of the whole intention of the ski is really starting to lean more towards off-trail use. And there's a few elements that kind of suggest that. So one of them, we're, again, fish scale, nice long fish scale grippy zone here. But we also get a partial metal edge. So about from one hand to the other, that is a metal edge. And what happens when you have a metal edge on a cross-country ski, you get more edge grip. So if you're skiing off-trail, even almost in like a backcountry situation, and you encounter some icy terrain or some wind-scoured snow that's really firm, this is going to be a lot more confidence-inspiring, and you're going to feel a lot more stable. But this is noticeably heavier in my hands than really anything I've held so far because there's no other metal. You know, cross-country skis don't really need metal at all. Unlike a downhill ski that has a full metal edge, the only reason you need it is if you're going to be going off trail. So OT65, although it will fit in a groomed classic track, it's not something that I would personally recommend, and I wouldn't be I wouldn't be offended if somebody disagreed with me. I just find that you really lose quite a bit of efficiency. Similar boot here. This one also gets this XC5 boot, the same boot that we see in the R-Skin, and kind of a testament to the versatility of this boot. And we will see kind of things increase of the off-trail capabilities in boots as we keep going here, or at least as we enter into the third price tier. And then over here on my left, we've got a couple skate skis. So going back to kind of knowing what you want to do on your skis, I don't recommend skate skiing for a true beginner cross-country skier. You know, once you have some experience over here or potentially over here, and maybe you want to pick up skate skiing, then this stuff is great, but I don't know. I mean, there's certainly situations where if you just really wanted to skate ski and you really know that you want to skate ski, you could do it. It doesn't happen that much that people go straight to skate skiing. So you're going to spend a little bit more on skate skis than you would over in that first price tier, and that's okay. So first ski here, this one's really cool. This is the Fisher Aero Guide 75 Skate, and this is like kind of a new thing. So I'm 38 years old. I basically stopped ski racing when I was 18, or at least in a Nordic capacity. And when I was still in the sport, or at least still racing competitively, stuff like this didn't exist. So I think it's really cool. This is intended to be more of a learning tool for skate skiing than most other skate skis on the market, or really every other skate ski on the market. It's interesting because it actually has some side cut. So this is a 45-40-45 side cut, and most skate skis are actually more shaped like a javelin. So the tip is narrower and then the rest of the ski is straight. This one actually has a tiny bit of side cut, and that makes it a little bit easier to control. So skating can be tricky when you first get into it. You can really feel like you're just like out on a sheet of ice, and your feet are going all over the place, and you don't really know how to control it, and you just kind of end up flailing a lot. This really helps you kind of get your skis back underneath you, but it's not the most efficient ski in the world. So if you kind of have existing skate technique and you get on that ski, you could be like potentially a little bit disappointed in your efficiency or your glide. But if you're brand new to skating and maybe you have some hesitancy or you're a little nervous about it, that's such a good choice. With these kind of lower tier skate packages, you're generally actually going to get a combi boot. And combi boots are interesting because they're intended to be used both for skate and classic. So you're going to get a little bit more ankle support than you would in a just classic specific boot, but not as much as you would get in a skate specific boot, which we'll look at. So, I'd be lying if I said there weren't some sacrifices with a combi boot on either end, but for a lot of people, they work really, really well. And you could get, say you want to have a skate and a classic setup and you want to save as much money as you possibly can, or do it in the least expensive way possible. You could get this package, this like Aero Guide 75 package. It's going to come with this boot, and then you could just buy like an XT60 and use the same boot, and it's going to be great. So there are some benefits to combi boots. Generally, that benefit is just savings and making things less expensive. And then moving along here, next ski is this Fisher Aerolite Skate 60. And this is shaped more like what I would consider a traditional skate ski. It's got kind of that more javelin shape, but still like wildly affordable. It's really cool that the technology has come a long way in the past couple decades, where now these like kind of still entry-level skate skis just have some awesome performance. So I've actually skied this one a lot. I've skied the Aero Guide 75 too, but definitely spent more time on the Aerolite Skate 60. And it doesn't feel like a race ski, but it's pretty darn efficient and really fun. So if you're if you're confident in yourself and your skating ability, or you feel like you can get there, you're a pretty fit, athletic person, and you're looking to kind of get into the sport for fitness reasons, I think this Aerolite Skate 60 is a great choice. Not going to be quite as forgiving as the Aero Guide 75 that we looked at moments ago, but still overall pretty forgiving. And then we do see a little bit of an increase in boot performance here from the Aero Guide to the Aerolite. This one comes with an RC3 combi boot, and you just get a little bit more upper cuff support, and we're gonna see kind of the end, or not the end because World Cup boots are crazy, but we're gonna see a true skate boot in a few skis here, and we can kind of look at the differences. But this is really quite good as a combi boot. It's, especially coming from a race background, it's easy for me to scoff at a combi boot sometimes, but this is like very, very impressive. And I think the amount of upper cuff support that they build in while still having enough flexion for classic skiing is very impressive and very cool. So that's it for the middle price tier. I would say that middle price tier is great for skiers who have some experience and have a little bit of a better sense of specifically what they want to do. And then moving into this last price tier here, a few different things happen. We kind of increase the variety a little bit, and we're also really starting to specialize. So I would say maybe this is a little bit of an exception. This is the Escape Outpath from Salomon. This is a very versatile ski, 64 millimeters wide. Sure, it could fit in a groomed classic track, but again, I wouldn't really recommend it. And then this ski, if anything, is kind of an increase in performance over the OT65 and an increase in price as well. In this kind of final tier, we're more in the 600 to 750 range. This ski gets a full metal edge rather than the partial metal edge. So even though we're 1 millimeter narrower, if anything, this ski leans more towards being used off trail than even that OT65. A little bit more grip in those kind of backcountry situations. And then, yeah, shout out to this Escape Outpath boot, because I think they did a fantastic job with this boot considering the price point. I just love how high this gaiter goes, and it really, to me, starts to feel like a boot that I would feel comfortable wearing in a backcountry situation. I could ski 8 inches of snow on this boot, and I wouldn't really be worried about things getting inside my boot, which is great. So that's a cool one to start with. And then these next two skis are really kind of starting to feel more like race skis. So there are several tiers above this third price tier that we're talking about. So if you're truly racing at a high level, you're probably going to want something more than this, but it's hard for me to think that these wouldn't be appropriate for most high school racers. I think you would do just fine. I wouldn't be surprised if your coaches encouraged you to get something a little bit more expensive, but I don't know. I'm very impressed with the performance of these skis. So first here, we've got this Fischer Twin Skin Pro. This is 41, 44, 44. So this is a classic ski, but this is the narrowest classic ski that we've looked at so far. So all these things over here, they're designed to be versatile and user-friendly. Skis like this are really starting to increase the efficiency and the speed, but it requires technique. You need to have a little bit more precise weighting and unweighting to get your proper grip. And part of that is because, so here we've got that twin skin system. And if you remember kind of thinking back to this R skin, there's just kind of more skin there. So they're just trying to make the skis as fast as they can without completely sacrificing grip. So that's where the technique and the ability level comes into play. And if I were to take a brand new skier, a brand new cross-country skier, and put them on these, they'd probably struggle. Whereas if you put them on the XT55, they're going to have a great time. So really fun. I've skied these quite a bit, and they're really good. Like, again, thinking back to like things that I raced on, that stuff is like better actually than what I raced on 20 years ago at a fraction of the price. So I think that's awesome. And then this is a true kind of performance classic boot. This is the RCS Classic. You start to get a carbon fiber kind of heel pocket here. Super light, super efficient. They're going to be really, really fast. And you don't have as much upper cuff support in this boot. You know, thinking back to like this X5 from Rossignol, you have that big upper cuff thing. And kind of the reason why is when you get to this level, you should have really good balance and you don't need that upper cuff support. You're benefiting more from the speed and the efficiency of the boot. And then moving on again, this Aerolite Skate 80, similar price tier. I think we're both in like the mid $700 with these kind of two Fischer more race style skis. Again, like World Cup skis are leaps and bounds beyond this, but this is really, really good. And like for me, as somebody with a race background, honestly, I don't need anything more than this. I think this ski is awesome. It's fast, it's efficient, it feels precise, it feels really, really fun to ski for me. And yeah, I don't think there's any reason why you can't consider something like this as a high school racer. And you know, there are benefits to this over the over the skis like the Aerolite 60, certainly benefits over the Aeroguide 75. But if you're new to skate skiing, you probably don't need this, and it might make more sense to just save a little bit of money and get one of these less expensive options. But if you're starting to get pretty good, you're starting to get comfortable out there, you've got like a ripping V2 alternate, go for it. And then I kind of mentioned this. This is the RC5 skate-specific boot. So this is going to just be more performance-oriented than kind of this RC3 combi boot that we looked at. You can see the cuff comes up a little higher. And then if you remember, this boot was super, super flexy, so you can, excuse me, so you can still classic ski on it. This boot is much, much stiffer because it's not designed for that ankle flexion that you need for classic skiing. It's just locking you right in there for skate skiing. So really cool. And then lastly, we don't need to spend too much time on these over here. We've got the Fischer Traverse 78 crown skin, as well as the Rossignol BC 80. I actually own the BC 80, and I think it's an awesome ski. Starting with this Fischer 78 in width, so you're not fitting this thing in a groomed classic track at all, and nor would you want to, because it's on the heavier side. It's got a full metal edge, got that long kick zone, the fish scale kick zone. You can also integrate an actual skin, so it's pretty cool. There's like a hole through the ski that your skin goes through and then goes over your base for even more grip. This is truly for somebody that's going out into the backcountry and exploring things. And when we say backcountry, I think we can use that term loosely. Like I said, I own that BC 80, and if I'm going out my back door and just going and kind of touring around my backyard or the woods behind my house, that's the ski I take. I'm going to be in ungroomed snow, I'm going to be in uneven terrain. Something like the OT 65 would work fine, or this Outpath 64, but I like having the width. So, you know, it's like I don't have to worry about groomed classic tracks at all. Having a little bit wider platform is great for me because you just get a little bit more stability, a little bit more float. And both of these use BC bindings. So that's where we're starting to see these more robust, heavier boots, higher ankle, and again, that NNN BC specific integration. And then lastly, very, very similar option here from Rossignol. This is the BC 80. No hole in the ski for an extra skin attachment, but still like a really nice long kick zone. And then these skis, I really like what they've done with these in recent years. I actually own the previous version or the previous generation of this ski, but it's actually got like a little bit of tip rocker up there. when you decamber the ski, you can start to see the tip start to rise a little bit. They might not have a hole in the ski, but Rossignol does integrate a skin attachment point up there on the tip. So again, if you really have serious demands for your ascents, then you can throw a skin on these as well. So really cool. Big fan of a lot of things up here. I'm the type of skier that put me on an Aerolite Skate 80 and I'm going to have a great time, or put me on a BC 80 and I'm going to be doing very different things, but I'm also going to have a great time. So I hope that was beneficial and interesting. This is just an example of all the packages and all the skis that we have on our site. So if you have any questions about things that you don't see up here, please don't hesitate to ask. Again, like cross-country skiing can be kind of confusing when you're first getting into it, and we're here to help. So yeah, let us know if you have any questions, and we will talk to you soon.